his role in the team, but Devin has been supporting startups at this stage for almost 7 years. So this is his specialty. And so without further ado, we're going to give a quick overview on what is Venture for ClimateTech. Hopefully that will answer many of your questions, and then we'll open up the Q&A, and feel free to hit us with any questions that you all have. So please, next slide. So this is the core team that you'll meet every day. We have another team member joining us soon. I actually believe he's on this webinar today, so excited to have you joining the team soon, Scott. Shantae Harris, who's not with us tonight, is our Director of Climate Investments and Partnerships. So she helps manage everything external. So she's the one that helps our founders navigate, go to market, for example, for like if you want to get to know the New York City MTA or Department of Transportation, as well as helps bring together the community of investors that fund our founders and who work with our community. So like quick little highlights about the program. We recruit high impact founders and innovations. We take a 3-phase approach. And what we mean by that is we spend about 6 months with our founders, and we have 3 distinct phases within the program. We also down select throughout that process. So we start with about 10 teams, but let's say that something happens in that second phase where teams present out. And if we feel like, hey, yes, we're confident they're making the progress, then that is great. If not, then we have that conversation. But essentially what we want to be able to say is after 6 months, we want to be really confident with investors because we work with such early stage founders. So we work with solo founders. You do not have to have a co-founder. You can be spinning your technology straight out of a national lab or university. You don't have to build that team. We help you build that team. So we look at our success metrics as helping you build out your founding team, helping you answer questions like how do you hire people when you don't have anything other than equity, or how do you even set up equity and think about equity. So we really work with early stage folks, and early stage, is complex. And so we want to make sure that by the time you're done, we're able to validate and write incredible recommendations for our founders. We recruit globally with a New York State lens. What we mean by that is that you can be anywhere, based anywhere. You do not have to office in New York by any means, but your technology has to make sense for New York State. So I would say, for example, if your technology needs a tropical environment, New York State is probably not a good fit, but if you can make the case, especially in your application, as to why New York State would be a good place to launch your climate company, that's the kind of application we're looking for. So, really our mission is geared around the Climate Leadership Community Protection Act. So it's our mission to help New York State reach its ambitious climate goals. So we're constantly keeping an eye on what technologies could be implemented in the next 5-10 years in New York State. The program is part-time, so if you need to balance another gig and this, you can. So it's spread out, but meant to be able to balance with other things you might be working on. And we mentioned sort of briefly, but we do support talent identification. So on average, our teams in our last cohort grew 2-3x in size. So if they came in a solo founder, they left with 4 team members. If they had 3, they left with 9. But we really do help with that team expansion because investors, they invest in great teams. And so we help you build awesome teams around your technology. And we provide up to $100K in non-dilutive funding, so in the form of a grant. That funding is staged. And we'll talk a bit about that more later. And again, angel or pre-seed stage is ideal. So you can't have raised a lot of external capital. We're really looking for that hyper early stage company. So phase 1 studio, we accept about 10 teams. We help you validate the business opportunity. We help you validate your go-to-market strategy. And then if you present out, you also in phase 1, one of the things that I think is really cool about this program is that we work with the Pollution Prevention Institute, and we actually cover the cost of them validating your GHG impact. So as a founder, you're able to exit this program, and when you're talking to impact investors or grants, you're able to hand over that math that has been externally validated by another source. Which can be really hard. So a lot of investors, right, are looking for those metrics, and we help make sure that by the time you leave, you have those metrics and that language in place. Phase 2 is when you start to receive the capital. So if you make it into phase 2, you receive $25K as a straight up grant and non-dilutive capital and $10,000 in reimbursement. So $35K total. And then in the final phase, you can access an additional 65K in follow-on funding, but you need a 2-to-1 investor match. So at this point, you need private capital to come in to access those dollars. And it doesn't have to be right away. So you don't have to access that funding while you're in the program. It's fine if that milestone comes later, but it's sort of a first come, first serve on that 65K spread out. So that's the total. That's what we mean when we say up to 100K. But it's non-dilutive, so we don't take any equity. And the final phase focuses on differentiated learning and helping you get placed in your next program. Some key dates to know. So our application is currently open. It closes March 4th. Our boot camp is like a week-long intensive taste of our curriculum. So you'll meet investors, mentors. You'll hear about the state of climate tech investing today, capitalization stacks. You'll meet our funder and many more partners. It's a really great sort of entry into our community, and we invite anywhere between 30 to 35 companies into our boot camp. At that point, we're also doing one-on-one interviews. We then take 20 teams to cohort selections, and you present in front of our board. So if you want to get to know our board better, and we will, of course, help you prepare for these different interviews. But if you want to get to know our board better, you can check out our website forclimatetech.org and look under team. We have a fantastic board with a bunch of different experts in climate who are there to help us evaluate which 10 companies we move forward with. By May 3rd, we would have selected, and May 9th, the cohort will kick off. So what does an average week look like? You're probably like, well, what does it mean to be part-time? What does that mean to participate? We have a weekly stand-up. So every Monday we meet and we express, hey, this is the big thing I'm trying to get done. This is what went right. This is what didn't go right. Essentially, we're helping you get into the habit of sending investor updates. It's a really great way of getting to bond with your other founders and other CEOs and ask for help within the community. And then every Tuesday and Thursday, we bring speakers to the table. So what we mean by that is we bring, for example, like if we do a talk on financial narrative, we bring an expert there, and we, as a cohort, work through that speaker. And then you do one-on-ones with a team for your hands-on coaching. Because there's one thing to learn it, right? But there's quite another to then apply that concept to your specific business. So we think that one of the many benefits of this is that you get our time one-on-one to work through specifically what you need for your company. So it's about 10 to 15 hours a week is what I say. What are we looking for? Again, this is climate impact that can have potential impact in New York State. So buildings, transportation, energy storage, smart grid, and it'd be great if your technology or solution helps or achieves impact some of those frontline communities. Hardware, software, and business model innovations are of course accepted. So biomaterials, anything like that. And this year we actually wrote a blog on like what we're also looking for. So we're also really interested in business model innovations that have to do with like, because of these technologies exist, the new business models that will arise. So the example I give is Nia, a company out of China that is essentially leasing batteries for EV, which is making buying electric vehicles a lot more affordable for that population. So we're also interested in those kinds of unique business models that come out of these technologies, as well as in fintech and insurance tech. Ideally, right, you're able to articulate to some degree your GHG impact. If you can't, we can help you, but we need to have signaling that your technology would have massive impact. Since we provide non-dilutive capital, we really are looking for those big emission impacts. We're looking for teams that are coachable, driven, and self-aware. We know that receiving feedback is never easy, but it's part of growth. And again, a commitment to supporting or benefiting New York's communities and larger climate tech ecosystems. We want people that want to be part of the community. Last year, our founders just, we were so proud of their successes. So they've raised already about 4.6, oh, sorry, yeah, you were on the right slide, about 4.6 in non-dilutive, actually that number has shifted dynamically. It's about 8.2 million in non-dilutive funding from outside sources. So we need to update that slide, but, and they've received about 4 million in private investment with another 200K committed. So of the 8 companies that have graduated, they have had tremendous success in raising capital post our program. They've closed first pilots, been accepted to Breakthrough Energy, and 2 of our teams have successfully licensed IP from NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and we're helping that 3rd one finish their licensing process. So we also help you identify IP that can help you get to market faster. Just been really proud of that progress so far. Next slide, please. Keys to a strong application. So things we look for, as specific as possible as you can be. We know that this is the early days, but the better you can articulate the impact of your technology, the easier it is for us to make the case on your behalf. And then please hone in on how this can be impactful for New York State, because that is, again, the lens we look at these applications. And if you have competitors, share them. Competitors mean there is a healthy market. So if you are saying things like, we're the only ones, I promise you, as much as you think that, there's at least one other person out there, and we need to know who they are. So you can let us know how you are better than them, different than them, but share who they are. And then be yourself. Experience is gained in a lot of different ways. We know everybody's path is different, and we care to get to know you. So be yourself, and don't feel afraid to showcase that. Next slide, please. All right. That was a quick overview. I already see some Q&A, so I'm going to go check on that. Oh, definitely been getting ahead of it. Yes, we will provide a copy of the presentation recording. Yes, we would love to get to meet more advisors and mentors. We're always enjoy growing our mentor community. And yes, if you're based in New Zealand, you can still apply.
Jackie, while we give folks a second to type some answers in the chat, could you expand on like the depth of being involved with the New York lens? Like, is it like being in, I know you just had a question of like, is it having an office? Is it wanting to do business? Like, what are some examples that we have that we could share?
Sure. So one of our companies is called Olokun Minerals. They actually are based in California, and her technology essentially works with desalination plants to take minerals out of brine water and prevent sort of that really salty brine water from going back into the ocean and causing acidification. So she's not based in New York, but her technology has clear applications for New York State and working with our desalination plants. Another example would be dynamic air cooling. That company is based out of Poland, so nowhere near New York State. Pavel and his team essentially have created super freeze technologies, like AC technology that does not require refrigerants or any chemicals. Right, so New York City has a ton of cooling needs, lots of AC needs. If you've ever been to New York City in the summer, you know exactly how sticky and hot it can get. And so, you know, technology that can work without refrigerants and other chemicals is huge. So your technology has to be applicable essentially to the communities within New York State, and you have to show an interest in launching or bringing your technology into New York State. New York State is an incredible market for climate tech because of our policies and the different laws that are associated with New York State. They're truly leaders in climate technology adoption, but we need to know that you have done your homework, or at least, you know, Googled how your technology could apply to New York State. So we want a global impact, but we need to know that the communities in New York State could benefit in some way. And feel free to ask the questions out loud so everybody can hear them.
Yeah, so also for the for folks, if you raise your hand, if you have a more complicated question, that's the way I can turn your mic on and see it. But I will just jump to the next question. And I'm not going to, I apologize for mispronouncing your last name. We have Peter. He's asking, do you have any success cases in software or fintech, or is this more of a hardware accelerator?
We accept both, and we did accept software companies, but when we are looking for software companies, we're looking for ones that are I gave actually fintech as an example. So one of our companies is called Climatize. They are, if you're familiar with Acorns, they help you round up your loose change and then invest directly into community climate projects like solar community projects. So that's actually a consumer-based app, right? But we believe that technology has the ability to build a movement behind their tech, as well as to help fund technology that is incredibly meaningful in our path to decarbonization. So we do accept software companies. We also had a company that helped with like traffic and other pieces. That one did not make it to phase 2, but we did accept them initially into the program. So we can do any of the above, but we're looking for software companies that solve really sticky challenges. So I think, the other example, so like, again, like ones that are revolving around the new business models that are coming out, or different pieces like that, like insurance tech, things like that, that don't per se have a hardware component, but that are solving sticky issues within climate innovation or what's coming. Hopefully that answers your question.
Jackie, the next question we have is, can you expand more on the funding for phase 3? How does the co-investment work to access 65K or more?
Sure.
We mentioned 1 to 2 external, but could you do like a numerical, like a quick,
yeah.
Maybe.
So let's say you get a commitment for 150,000 from an angel investor, and you close that funding. You have that funding in the bank. We are then able to match, as a 2 to 1 and present that 65K. So we hopefully have it as a carrot to help investors close. So we think a lot of our founders have been able to move their rounds a lot more quickly because they're able to say, hey, if you hurry up and help us, we get to access these dollars. So we want to use that, but we also want to know that there's external market validation and that you are going to be able to raise capital. So that's another signal for us that we can do so. Again, right, we provide non-dilutive capital. So we're looking for those market signals to make sure that we can continue to support. Our companies have raised over 4 million since exiting the program. So a lot of them were able to achieve those milestones. We're really proud of them. But we know that every company's path is unique, and some founders weren't even worried about that because they just wanted our help with grant writing. So we have grant writers and other people to support in non-dilutive capital. So the example I gave, dynamic air cooling, he focused with us on grant writing, and he was able to access 3.2 million, right, Devin? 3.2 million?
Yeah.
Yes, from a grant.
Euro to dollar conversion is a little funny, but
a little funky, but you get the point. So and like we supported that grant, we wrote recommendations for that grant. So our founders take different paths, and each company should have a unique capitalization stack, right? So a lot of the things we talk about is what is the right funding path for you, and we work on that as a team with you. Our founders are just as likely to, in this space, you can raise so much non-dilutive capital. So you will hear me, it's hard to get it, but if you do, it's incredibly impactful. So our founders have raised about 8.2 million in non-dilutive capital. But that's how the 65K comes in. That means you've raised it from private investments, so angels, etc. Hopefully that math helped, Paul. And then I saw another question that you did answer, Devin, but I want to make sure that people hear that. You asked, what are usual sources of non-dilutive funds from external sources? And those are grants. Our founders have applied for a variety of different ones, but either they get into a different accelerator program that provides capital. We help them apply for grants. So like, for example, I think one of them, got into Breakthrough and received, I forget the exact dollar amount, 1.4 from them. So, things like that. But we support both dilutive and non-dilutive forms of fundraising. But more importantly, we make you the kind of team that is exciting for those people to fund, and help you build the foundation for your business so that you are intrinsically interesting to these other funders. Chris, did you want to go on the next question?
Yeah. The next one was, how many applicants we only have 1 year to reflect on so far, but how many applicants for each cohort do we typically receive?
We received a little over 600 last year, unique applications. So yes, and we took 30 to 35K in boot camp. So please take your time on these applications. The more thoughtful you are, the easier it is for us to consider you. We can really tell when somebody has put attention into an application. And I promise you, having personally applied for grants for my last business, our application is much lighter than a grant application, but we need that critical information to make decisions. So please take your time and highlight what makes yourself or your team or your technology great.
Sorry, the next question we have is, things shifted around on me. If we're looking to have some number of hardware products, how far along should we be in the development of those products? Initial designs, prototypes, can we apply with an early stage theoretical designs and mature those during the program? And that's from Matthew DiStefano.
So we'll accept a range as long as you have not raised a lot of external capital, right? So I mean, you can have raised millions in grants, but not from like, let's say you've raised 2 million from investors, you probably aren't, we can help you find a program that's a better fit for you. But if you've raised 2 million in grants and you have a few, your first prototype, that's fine. It's also fine if you don't have a prototype. So Lacey from Liquid Minerals, the example I gave earlier, she did not have a prototype. We helped her create the plan to build her first prototype and solidify the IP around it by working with her and NREL. But then we had other founders whose prototypes were almost pilot ready and who actually closed pilots and started piloting their technology while they were within our program. So we can support that range because not all prototypes are made the same, right? Like one prototype to build might cost 10 million, the other one might cost 250,000, right? There's a range in the complexity of the technology we work with. And so we really take that into account. So if your technology is, we basically just need to know that you would have the ability to either pull that team together or build it yourself, right? We need to see that capability. So we had another team called Volt Post who is electrifying lampposts and making them EV stations. They came in without a prototype, but he used to be the director of innovation at Samsung. We were very confident in his ability to build a hardware product, right? So I think it just depends on what you're trying to do. And if you can showcase that you have at least thought through what it would take to build a prototype. But we know prototyping is hard without funding, especially in hardware, so.
For sure. A good question that Jacqueline Jones is asking is the information in the application kept confidential?
Yes, everything you put into your application is confidential.
Yeah, that's a big part of us working with NYSERDA, New York State requires a lot of being in line with all of that.
Santiago, yes, still apply. I saw your question about you've raised a pre-seed of 900K. Yes, still apply. Just help us understand, again, that New York State lens. I think Santiago, earlier you asked a question, you said you were in New Zealand. So if a lot of that is like, how do you enter the New York State market? That's of interest to us. And Paul, I saw your question on, do you only support applications for grants in the US or could they be outside of the EU? The example I just gave of Pavel and dynamic air cooling, that was a grant of 3.2 million from the EU. So yes, we support grants outside the United States as well. We do have a wide network on SBIR, et cetera, but we can support outside of the United States as well.
Lots of more questions funnel in. A benefit that I've learned about our program, Jackie, that I think maybe you could expand on more is just like the NYSERDA ecosystem, from like the interns to the EIRs and all that stuff. Which could you share more about like how Venture helps plug into that with everybody here?
Sure, and I'd love to chat about that. Real fast, you do not have to set up a company in New York or in the US to access the funds. Pavel is still fully based in Poland. He's my favorite example. His technology is also awesome. So our funders have an amazing ecosystem. So if you haven't heard of NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research Development Authority, I highly recommend looking them up. The work that they do in New York State to help decarbonize the state is absolutely phenomenal. But we are part of a broader climate tech community that we have access to EIRs, CXO matching, and support for grant writers depending on your needs. So the NYSERDA EIRs are mentors who have been, so we have regular mentors, but we also have NYSERDA EIRs that can help support on like a contract basis paid for by NYSERDA. So you get 40 hours of work from a specialist who you've met with and consulted. You create like a mini contract and they can support your work, and you can keep working with different EIRs or the same one as long as you're able to validate the work you are doing with them. So while we provide up to 100K in funding, we help our founders. So of our 10 founders, 8 were able to access pro bono legal full-time, even post the program. So they were able to get free legal support for all of their, whether they were just setting up their company or needed to file patents or, needed support with FAA regulations. We help our founders access pro bono legal, and we help them access early team members that can help them achieve key milestones through programs like the NYSERDA EIR. So it really is an incredibly impactful community for founders. I personally get very jealous of these resources because when I was a founder, they did not exist. So it's really incredible to see the impact that these organizations are having. And our sibling program is called Scale for ClimateTech. It's for later stage companies, but we help companies go, that one is specifically for hardware. So ours is software, hardware, and business model innovation. But our sibling program helps hardware companies go from prototype to mass production and make that leap in their systems. So we also have a very supportive network of manufacturers and things like that and prototyping needs if you need help in those areas.
I want to make sure I didn't skip over a question. Did you address Santiago's question about they've raised 900K so far?
Yes.
Is that still okay? Okay, cool. I answered that.
Especially if you're abroad and you're trying to make the leap into the New York State market. We understand, right? Like there's, essentially we can take into account, right, different companies and different needs. If you've raised 900K, but your technology requires millions more to build a prototype. We had our one company this past cohort called New Frontier Aerospace that's building hypersonic aircrafts that can get you anywhere in the world in 2 hours and are carbon negative. But right, like their prototype is going to cost a lot to build. So it's like a very different, there's, we don't compare apples to oranges. We really try to take each unique case into account when we're looking at stage and our ability to support.
Great. I did drop some links. We'll give it a couple more minutes for some more questions to file in. There are some links in the chat. Obviously, the where to apply is on FSS. So hopefully, it's not going to be, it'll be useful for you to fill it out and have that info on FSS since a lot of applications go through there. We have our newsletter and we have all of our social media accounts there. So definitely check that out. That's where all of any info about this that comes up, that's where you can find it. And the other one too, I'll repost it here for more in-depth questions, because obviously there's always those, well, what about this questions? We have our general email that goes to our team that you can send those questions to.
And I promise you, we read every single application. Our brains almost melt, but we read every single one. So just know that we do take the time to read everything you put forward.
Very cool. I will give it 30 more seconds for some questions. If not, I think we can wrap this up.
Thank you for joining us. We look forward to meeting you. One more Q&A came in. You do not need to set up a US entity to access capital. You just need to have a bank account, even if it's in your own home country.
So to clarify, I think that might have been a question more towards like if you're trying to raise money in the US or certain grants, if you apply for, you will need to have a US entity, which can be a wholly owned subsidiary of your current entity, wherever you're located.
But we can help you figure that out later. First, let's get you in and then we can help with that if that's an issue. But for our needs, you do not need to have that, I guess.
Jacqueline, there will be, by additional meetings, I'm assuming you mean info sessions like this. Excuse me, there will be, we'll have a couple more. There's one in a couple of weeks.
This one's February 3rd, I think.
Yeah, I'll make sure I drop that link. Give me 1 minute while I pull it. And because actually the same place where you can sign up for more is where these recordings ultimately go to live. So if you want to see one, even we did previously, we did one with some of our cohort 1 members, which was really interesting because they share their perspective on what the program was like and how it helps them specifically. But there will be more.
Oh, we had a lot more Q&A come through. Okay. Okay, got it. It's so funny on Zoom. You have to give it that awkward 10-second count. I think we're all set.
Yeah, and again, if there's extra questions that I'm the worst. I'll like walk away from a meeting. I'll be like, I didn't ask my one question. Definitely use that. It goes to all of us. So we're always looking at it, and it might be the 4 of us, but I like to think we cover a lot of ground. So.
Okay, great.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good morning, evening, or afternoon, wherever you are in the world.
Yeah, and the recordings will be coming out tomorrow or Thursday. So stay tuned. Bye.
Thank you all.